Okay, and now I would like to introduce to you our Attorney General and Gubernatorial Candidate, Bill McCollum.
This comes off, I can tell it does, and I'm just going to talk to you from up here. Stand behind this thing doesn't strike me as the right thing to do for some reason, but I appreciate it. I guess there were 2 chairs over here, and I could have sat in one of those. Maybe I should walk over there. What do you think? Just for a moment, I'll just sit in the chair just for a second, then I'll get back up again. Then I can say I really was here tonight. You know, I'm not here because I'm here to debate. Obviously, I'm not. I want to get acquainted with you, and you to get acquainted with me. There are a few people in the audience tonight who I've known for a long time, and you know me very well, people like Jim Frisch and Leslie Waters. I've seen, perhaps there are others here. I'm just beginning to recognize faces. But for the most part, the Tea Party movement consists of people who come forward with energy in this campaign, and they're ready to make a change, and that's what I've been about all my life. And I'm very proud of the fact that last week that Dick Armey at Freedom Works endorsed me, and in the letter he said, in the endorsement letter, he said, Bill McCollum was Tea Party before there was a Tea Party. And you got to hear an explanation of that. So that's a lot to live up to, I will tell you that. But I want to talk about why I'm running for governor. I also want to talk about some issues and just do some straight talk with you. The first thing off the top I cannot ignore is what's going on in the Gulf. I had the media ask me about that just as I walked in here. And we have a huge catastrophe out there. We have a blowout. Everybody talks about an oil spill. This is not an oil spill. This is a blowout of tens of thousands of barrels of oil every single day that's going on out there. It's been going out there for weeks and weeks. We're well over 2 months of this happening. And we don't know the full ramifications. But what we do know, and I know as your Attorney General, is that we have 2 major concerns. One is, how do we protect our state? How do we do what we have to do? How do we help people file claims? How do we try to get tourists to still come? How do we try to keep this part of Florida, which is yet to be directly impacted by this, and we pray it never is, from losing business, from losing tourists, from losing people who would otherwise come here? And of course, how do we protect our ecology and the breeding grounds for our fish and so on? And then the sad part of that part is that fishermen and others have already lost their livelihoods out in the Panhandle for the foreseeable future. And the business, of course, is cut at least in half for almost all of them. The other part of those is, what can we do to get this administration and this government to really get with it after more than 60 days? And I'm going to tell you, it makes me angry. I know BP's at fault, and my job is to help hold their feet to the fire, and we're going to do that. We are doing that every day. This trust fund that's been set up, I'm not sure about the escrow account, exactly how it's going to work, but it looks like it's going to work very much like we've been doing, except the federal government's going to administer it. And everybody's going to have a claim, and we're going to help people with those claims to recover their damages. But I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about what is this government doing with respect to mitigating the losses. They may not be able to stop the blowout until they drill those wells down there. But I flew out over the Gulf of Mexico more than 3 weeks ago in a Black Hawk helicopter right off of Pensacola Beach. At that time, there was not a single boat visible, not a skimmer, not one of those vessels that brings up oil. And yet there was an oil slick about 5 to 10 miles off the coast. We all know what's happened since then. We've had oil coming up on the beaches in Pensacola, Panama City, and everywhere in between. And we're very fortunate the winds haven't driven more of it there. This storm looks like it's not going to do it. But sooner or later, there's going to be a hurricane, not just a tropical storm in the Gulf. There always is. It may not hit Florida, but there'll be one in the Gulf. And we're not as prepared as we should be. We in Florida are, but the federal government's not. And what I'm talking about is President Obama not doing his job. And I am specifically talking to you tonight about the fact that we had, as of last week, only 28 skimmers out there. Only 28, at least off the coast of Florida, for however many miles working. There are hundreds of skimmer boats, vessels available. Big ones. They do about 50 miles, 250 feet wide, 50 miles a day. And it takes a lot of them. It can't just be 1 or 2 or 3 or 4. But you have a lot of them. And yet this week I wrote to Secretary Napolitano, Homeland Security. Why did I write her? Well, I copied a lot of other people. That's why I wrote her. But I'm very concerned because I had called for the waiver of the Jones Act. Some of you know what that is. That's the provision that keeps foreign flag vessels from being able to do some of this work. It makes no sense to me they haven't waived it, just said bring whatever vessels there are in here. But in that process, I got a call from a Jacksonville company. They're called Crowley Maritime. And they said, look, we got lots and lots of skimming vessels. We want to be a part of this. We've tried to be a part of it, but the Coast Guard, the government, BP, nobody's hearts. We even have 4 large skimming vessels in Louisiana that have never been put to use. We'd like to do that. And so I wrote her and I said, what gives? 60 some odd days after this, what gives? The sheer incompetence of the federal government in not doing any better the job than they have in this regard, or not looking at new technology, bothers me. Now, I can rat all night on this administration for that reason, because that's Florida. It's not partisan. It's not me versus them. It's just a fact. But I want to talk a little bit more with you about what's really wrong with Washington and Florida. I cut my teeth on politics quite a while ago. And some people say, well, he's an insider, not an outsider. I'm not inside anything. I'm just somebody that's had some experience and observed some things and had a chance to fight for freedom and liberty and been given the privilege of being a public servant a couple of times over in Congress and now as Attorney General, and would like to be your governor. When I was elected with Ronald Reagan in 1980, I wanted to do the same thing that ought to be done right now. And we did a lot of it. We moved in the right direction. Most of it's been reversed. It's why we're having such a big problem right now. But if I were going to Congress, I'm not running for that, that's Marco Rubio doing it or somebody else. But if I were going to run for Congress or the Senate today, I'd be saying the same thing I did in 1980. We need to reduce the size and scope of the federal government. We need to cut, not increase, the capital gains tax. We need to see the federal government reduce the corporate taxes so that we can get our international trade going and produce jobs that we really need to get this economy going. And we need to reduce the regulatory burdens on small businesses and the unfunded mandates on local governments and state governments. Now, we're not seeing that. Instead, this president, this administration seems to be more interested in growing government than growing private sector jobs. And I know one thing for sure. They are more interested in redistributing wealth than in growing wealth. And we know there's a difference. Growing wealth is what this nation's been all about. I gave a talk at a church service this morning because it's, even though a week early, it was their 4th of July, their tribute to veterans. And I talked about the founding fathers of our country and the fact that of the 56 founding fathers of our nation, all of them believed in God. All of them were patriots in every sense of the word, those who signed the Declaration of Independence. When I say the founding fathers, obviously there were some later writing the Constitution that weren't part of that declaration. But of the Declaration signers, 56 of them. About a third of them were, there was one Catholic, a third of them were Congregationalists, a third of them were Presbyterians, and a third of them were Episcopalians. But to every person who put their life on the line when they signed that Declaration of Independence, there was a sense of purpose. They had been persecuted, and their ancestors recently had come over to this country for religious views and for other intolerances, and they knew the meaning of freedom. They knew exactly what they meant. They understood that fact. They understood the importance of the rights of individuals, the right of an individual to be protected against the government intrusion in their lives, which is what this revolution was all about. And that's what I talked about this morning. I'm not going to talk it all to you tonight, but I want to put the flavor on this, why I'm here tonight, and why this is so important in the context of it. We today don't have enough people in government who seem to get it from the fundamental standpoint. The wrong crew largely is there. Some of us who serve are very versed in that, but some are simply not. The reality is today, we look back on our Constitution and we look at what's happened. And we look at the health care bill that became law as an example of that. It was the greatest commandeering of state assets ever in history. It's a huge thing, but it also invades you and my personal liberties. And I'll tell you why. You probably know, I'm sure most of you do, that just a few minutes after the president signed that bill into law, along with 12 other attorneys generals and now 19 other states, 20 of us all together, governors and attorney generals, I filed a lawsuit in the Northern District of Florida to have that law declared unconstitutional.